Welcome to your introduction to our Glaciers lab. We're going to go look at the lab online, the lab report document that you can download that you're going to put your answers into, and have a couple reminders about how to do some of the annotations that you're being asked to do. Okay, so this is a look primarily at mountain glaciation or alpine glaciation, which is pretty different from continental scale glaciation like we would have had during the ice ages across much of North America. So you're going to be introduced to both types of glaciation. They both sculpt the landscape and they both leave behind really clearly identifiable and really dramatic changes to the landscape and types of features in the landscape. But being that we live where we do, near the Sierras, we're going to really focus on the type of glaciation that you might more readily see if you were to go up to Yosemite or go up to Kings Canyon. And the other type of glaciation you're more likely to see if you're sort of in the northern Midwest of the United States and you have a little bit of this background knowledge, you know what to look for in the landscape. But just because of where we are while we're learning this material, we're going to really focus on alpine glaciation. So you can go ahead and download this document. As always, if you can put your answers in a color other than black, that's helpful. And you'll see that this is the same exact questions that are in the lab itself on Canvas. But on Canvas, you have a lot more introductory material to help you get familiar with the content if you're not already. So there's a bit of introduction on Canvas with a few new words, new terminology that you might not be familiar with: ablation, sublimation, snowfield as opposed to glacier, what the difference is. And there's some nice images that are sort of summary images that show you what some of these features look like in the landscape, right? So we're mostly thinking about glaciers, this big mass of ice that is filling in a valley and is weighty enough, it's thick and heavy enough that it's moving under its own weight due to the pull of gravity downhill. So that's mainly what we're focusing on, but there are these associated features in the landscape that have to do with glaciated regions. So there's a little bit of specific description of some of the different types of glaciers and ice sheets that do some of this glacial sculpting of the landscape. And then there's a lot more detail on what some of those features are that are left behind after glaciation is stopped. It's no longer actively shaping the landscape, but all of these features are left behind. And that's what we see when we go up to Yosemite. Very much shaped by glacial sculpting, but we don't necessarily see a glacier in Yosemite Valley right now, right? So the climate has changed enough from the last ice age and from multiple ice ages really, during which the Yosemite area was glaciated and filled in by glaciers. And now we see something more like this, where there are individual valleys. So this would be maybe a good analogy of what you see in Yosemite, right? Sort of high, steep-sided walls, very dramatic, but a sort of rounded, smooth, at this point somewhat flat because it's been filled in with sediment, valley floor. So this is looking at that same image above that has glaciers and ice and snow in the landscape, and it's looking at what the landscape looks like after you've taken all that ice away. You've warmed that climate locally enough that you no longer have the ice, but you have all the features left behind. And then there is quite a bit of information given to you in these charts. So some of this is just a chart version format of information you're given otherwise in the text, and particularly in these images. So again, some of us learn better through visuals. We all, I think, benefit from seeing visuals. So these visuals are really useful, but this is another way to sort of categorize and list a bunch of these things and have a little bit more description of them, right? So you could go find the first one here, a cirque in this image, and you can see here's the cirque. So it's this sort of top end of the valley that's sort of in a rounded shape, right? Due to having been the top of a glacier as it was sliding downhill, and it's actually giving you a little bit more specific description of it so that you're not trying to figure out what it means from that image entirely, but you have some description. And in general, these charts are letting you know whether that feature is something you would find due to mountain glaciation, so alpine glaciation like we'd find having sculpted areas of the high Sierra Nevada, or whether it's due to continental glaciation. And you'll see as you go through these that some are due to one or the other, and then there are some things that are due to both that you're going to find in both kinds of past environments. So all of that information is helping you interpret some of the maps that you're looking at in part of this lab. Once you're a little bit familiar with some of that background material, and I suggest skimming through it at least and becoming nice and comfortable with the images, and through the images, maybe some of the details in those charts, right? But they're meant to be, the charts in particular are meant to be referenced as needed as you go through these activities. So on Canvas, we have all of the context and all the background material as well as the questions, whereas in the lab report, you just have the questions. So they're numbered the same. It should be pretty easy to go back and forth, but I would suggest having the Canvas page open as you go through and then just recording your answers over in the lab report.